Hi guys, Adam McCubbin here. Super excited to share with you this episode today. I hope you get out as much information as I did doing this interview. And without further ado, here's the episode. Okay, so today we've got Andrew Reid. He's a veteran of the personal training and coaching industry in Australia. He's been coaching for, I believe, 20 plus years. He's a prolific blog writer for several big online publications, including Breaking Muscle. He's got his own book. And what I love about Andrew Reid's writing, he's got a bit of a cranky and a no BS policy that I find quite refreshing, and he's a strong voice of reason in otherwise very confusing industry. I first met Andrew at a FMS certification in 2012, and I've followed his work online since, and I'm fortunate to spend some time with him today on the podcast. So welcome, Andrew.
Thanks, Adam. Good to be here.
Yeah. So before we get into the nitty gritty, just give us a bit of a snapshot of who Andrew is and what you are currently sort of focused on with your work.
Well, you've already outed me as being old, courtesy of my work experience. So I was actually on another podcast just before this, and I worked out it's 26 years of training people. So I'm 46, nearly 47. I started about 21. Have done, like all the normal stuff that people did back then. So back then, obviously no internet. In fact, I think email had just become like kind of a common thing. Yeah. So there's really not this kind of stuff going on. And the only information around was bodybuilding information. That was, and you either were, if you were an athlete and you were good, you were training at like an institute of sport kind of place, like a very high level pro coaching kind of facility, or you're in a commercial gym doing bodybuilding stuff, because that was all that anyone really understood. There was no, certainly wearing bumper plates, no one was doing power cleans over in the corner, no battling ropes or I don't know, any of that, no air dynes or rowing machines. Yeah. And then along the way, it's changed a lot. It's probably the biggest single thing that changed things was, for me, I needed shoulder surgery in 2007. And in an effort to avoid shoulder surgery, I was looking at everything. So I discovered FMS. I started looking at kettlebells. And at the time, the highest FMS workshop you could do, like their best workshop, was this thing that you had to be an RKC, which is a kettlebell certification. You had to be an RKC to do this particular FMS workshop. And because I was interested in both, and then I thought, this is the thing. So I did the kettlebell workshop so I could go to this thing. Along the way, I became a Master RKC, so I used to travel around the world and teach people how to use kettlebells. And then now I teach for FMS as well. So there's those two things combined probably made the biggest change to everything in terms of work. Yeah. One of the main things that I identify with your writing is your use of analogies to the late 80s and early 90s action movie references, which I've got a common love for that genre. Can you talk about just those, I guess, early inspirations? I've heard you talk about it before, sort of who were they? And yeah. Well, again, that's what was available. I got to think, I think it was like my 13th birthday or something. So, like one of those now you're a teenager kind of things. I was allowed to have like a sleepover. Yeah. And my brother, who's a couple of years older, went and rented like Conan the Barbarian for me and my friends, because we weren't old. Like it was probably like an M or something, or an R, I don't know. But I mean, we weren't old enough at 13 to go rent this thing. And so I saw Conan the Barbarian. I'm pretty sure Bloodsport was around maybe a couple of years later. So, that was really for action movies. I mean, there are some great action guys now, like The Rock, for instance. But you had Sylvester Stallone, you had Jean-Claude Van Damme, you had Arnie, Chuck Norris. Like there was just no shortage of sort of meatheads that you could watch shoot people and blow shit up. It was the golden time of action movies, and all of them though were these ripped, muscular guys. And so, to me, I was interested in martial arts, and I was like, well, this is what I'm supposed to look like. So, and I was pretty skinny as a kid, And probably, I don't think my voice broke till about year 10. I was a little bit slow on the old maturation process. And the only way I could actually play sport was to get in the gym. And so at my school, you had to be in year 9 to be allowed in the gym. And I'll just go every lunchtime and started lifting weights. And so, it was, I can remember the first time I bench pressed a bar plus a 20 kilo plate on either side. Like that was such a big deal. I can remember the first time I squatted, the same kind of thing, but all driven off that early love of these like Sylvester Stallones and Arnie's and those guys.
Yeah. And so sort of stepping away from that, I think a lot of the guests that I've had on the podcast before, I guess leaders in the industry, and they've all sort of had one common thing, that they were in the right place and they met some mentors that I guess took them under their wing. Who were those sort of early guys that sort of, I guess, gave you the initiative to say seek out people at FMS or RKC? Was there anyone that you can think of that would come to mind?
Yeah, look, it's Ian King. I mean, for people who don't know, Ian is probably the most ripped off guy in strength and conditioning. He's unilateral training. You know about that because of him. Rep tempo. So as much as Poliquin is usually associated with being the rep tempo guy, the original work on it was done as a collaborative. Ian King and Charles Poliquin did it together. Yeah. And he was head of the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association when I'd been working for 2 or 3 years or so. So the first workshop I ever went to that wasn't like like the normal kind of fluff fitness kind of certification. Like it was something that
to get your CEC points and.
Yeah, this had no CEC, so that was a big deal to spend my money on it. Yeah. And it was held at the VIS, and so there were a bunch of really high level, like Olympic kind of strength coaches there, and a few trainers like me, but not many. Nearly all of them were. Well, I'm the rowing coach for Australia. I'm the the strength coach at the VIS. There was the guy who was in charge of Taekwondo and Judo for Australia, and so I got to meet some really cool people, but all because I went to this Ian King thing. Yeah. And it was how to write strength training programs, and he brought out a book that like his entire system of how to do it from basically client intake all the way through in sort of stages, and he had. So there's like a control stage, and then you end up at, like a strength and power kind of point on the other side. And it all obviously was very logical and made a lot of sense and colored everything after that. And then, because I met the guy who was the boss of the VIS weight room, Vern McMillan was his name. Yeah. And I had to do some hours for the strength and conditioning thing anyway. And I didn't really want to go to an AFL team to do it like a lot of people do because I don't really like footy. And I said, can I come do my hours here? And he liked me. And he said, yeah, absolutely. Come in, do your hours. And, so now I got to see like hockey and swimming and tennis and a bunch of these other things. And they were experimenting with a lot of the Paul Chek stuff. So a lot of unilateral stuff, a lot of, I don't want to say unstable because it wasn't the way most people think about unstable training, but like single leg. So removing some of your support, putting the weight on one side of the body, so anti-rotation. And so I started playing around with that in like 98. And so when you come forward now I went to my first FMS workshop in 2010. It all just makes sense to me. I'd been doing that stuff already for 20 years. Yeah. So... like 12 years at that point. And we get to now when I'm presenting it and, people are like, oh, like it all just seems so simple. Well, yeah, I got 20 years of experience of this. And I got lucky because I went to this workshop that I was interested in. I met these really clever guys who were at that point, I guess where I am now, they already had decades of experience and they were already saying, well, this works, forget that, that doesn't work. And, like I was cutting clutter out already. And sometimes, like you look at, and it's always the same, things go in waves in our industry and people come on and go, oh, this is the new big thing. I'm like, oh yeah, I was doing that in 98. Good one. Yeah. And it works. So good idea, but you didn't come up with it. So, a lot of the, but that's also the nature of the industry is because the turnover is very high, right? Yeah. So I think we lose 10% of new trainers a year up until the 5-year mark, and then 70% of those left are gone. So if you start with 100 personal trainers, by the end of 5 years, there'll be 21 left. And so, if you have a decent product, if you're just quiet after like you blast it for a couple of years, make a lot of money, go quiet for about 4 or 5 years, blast it again, there won't be anyone there who remembers the initial release of it.
Yeah.
And now you've got a new product again. Everyone's like, oh, this thing's amazing.
Yeah.
You go quiet again, bust it out. And even if you look at something like Hammer Strength, I mean, you know who owns Hammer Strength, right? It's the son of the guy who created Nautilus. It's the intention of Hammer Strength is no different than Nautilus in terms of creating ideal strength curves with machines. But it's the exact same idea his dad had. He's just put a different label on it.
Yeah, just remarket it, and people think it's the latest thing.
Absolutely.
I've heard you spent a bit of time under Dan John, and I've had Dan John on the podcast, and I love his work. I was just wondering if you had any Dan John stories or anything, any insights that sort of changed you as a coach.
Look, I don't have a great opinion of Dan John. I find him to be quite manipulative and untrustworthy as a person. I mean, in terms of things I've learned, don't trust him.
No.
He stabbed me in the back over a workshop here. He owes me about 10 grand in my eyes. I did a bunch of promotion for the workshop here. Yeah. He cancelled at my gym and ran it around the corner. Out of the people that went to his workshop, 28 of the 31 who went were because of me. So,
Okay. Oh, well, I didn't know that at all.
To say about Dan John.
Okay. And there any other figures that maybe left more of a positive impression or experience for you? The guys that you're still in contact with now?
Yeah, there are plenty. I mean, along the way when you go to learn stuff, I think a lot of people look for they don't go to the best, and a lot of people aren't willing to travel. And I think that was one thing that I did that. So the RKC comes to Australia now. The FMS comes to Australia now. When I did it, there was no choice. You had to go overseas. And so by going overseas, for FMS here, and I have to put myself down, you get me. But if you go overseas, maybe you get Gray. Maybe you get Lee Burton. Maybe you get, one of the guys who actually created the FMS. Yeah. Now, who's going to have more? So I've been playing with the FMS since about 2010. But you've got the guy who created it in 2001 teaching it. Well, who do you think is going to do a better job? So if you're prepared to travel and you go and meet some people. So Brett Jones, who is, he's the head instructor for Strong First. So he's a kettlebell guy. He also happens to be one of the lead instructors for FMS. So he's sort of super high level in my mind. So he's been, and he's also one of those guys who's just very helpful. So even though he's running two big organizations, he travels every weekend to teach. He always makes it seem like he's got all the time in the world for you. He also happens to have been a high-level power lifter, so he's got a great strength background. He's got an amazing corrective exercise background, and he's got 25 years of experience at a high level. So Brett has always been super helpful. I've been lucky to meet. I have my one of my triathlon coaches was a guy, Tony Benson. Tony was head distance coach for Australia for the Atlanta Olympics. He coached Emma Carney, Stephen Moneghetti, all these kind of people. So, how do you compete with that kind of experience? Robert Cabas for weightlifting. So he was silver medal at the 84 Olympics, and he's coached a bunch of guys to Commonwealth medals and onto the Olympic teams and things like that. So, being able to, if you're really stuck, kind of reach into your phone and go, hey, I don't know what to do. Is it okay if I call you about X, Y, or Z? And these guys are all super helpful, and they come back with, of course, call me on, this day and we'll chat. So there's been a number of people who are very helpful, and I think that's been the biggest thing is the generosity of spirit. And I will say, as much as I don't like Dan very much, he always was incredibly generous with me. I mean, he's dropped me off at the airport previously. He's taken me out for dinner when I've been stranded in Salt Lake City on my own. So he can be incredibly generous, but at the same time not. But these other guys I've never had anything but positive experiences with. Yeah,
and I think it's a testament to you that the reason your success and longevity is your ability to be able to network and to put your hand up and say, hey, can I have some help here? And that, I guess, influences the work that you've done yourself.
Well, but it's one of those things. I mean, the more you travel, the more people you meet, and as you meet some of these people. I mean, have you had Perry Nicholson on?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay, so I met Perry speaking at this thing. Perry has come out here. He's helped me with different things. Tim Anderson, I know you've had Tim on. Yeah, so I had been Olympic lifting and had smashed my hip up. I've got a torn labrum in one hip, and so, like Olympic lifting, that deep squat position, particularly snatching, is not good for my hip, as it turns out.
Yeah.
And Tim was, very helpful over email and, hey, try this and do that. And so the very early days of Original Strength, which was becoming bulletproof and crawling, I was one of the first guys to be road tested on. So there's been some really helpful people that you meet along the way, and I think as you meet more people, it allows you to meet more people. I guess I don't know if that makes sense, but
100%.
As your network grows, it makes growing your network even easier after that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it gives you that ability to be able to reach out as well and get some help. So just moving on to just your writing and specifically your voice when you write, you seem to sort of like, which I like, and I think obviously get a big following because of this. You sort of cut through a lot of the bullshit on social media. You call things out when they deserve to be. And I've heard you speak about before on a podcast, or maybe it was in an article you wrote, that it's ironic that your, almost profession relies on writing, even though in high school you sort of didn't do that well in high school, and now you're writing. Can you speak about that and where you found that style?
Well, so I speak how I write. So that, for someone who's not and certainly in high school, I was not viewed as a talented writer. So I guess creative writing is not my thing. But early on, internet marketers would tell you had to write articles. And so my early articles were terrible. And I had this blog, and don't anybody try to find it because I've destroyed it. These articles no longer exist, but it was called Andrew Reid Uncensored. Yeah. And what it was a test to see how much of the internet paid attention. And so I learned really quickly how to make things rate highly on Google and how to use keywords and all that kind of stuff. I learned about article directories, and along the way, my articles got better and better.
Yeah.
And then, I started writing there was a magazine here called Ultra Fit.
Yeah.
And the editor then and she was quite a good editor. And so she would correct things or make you work on correcting them. Mm-hmm. And so I've had now help along the way because I've had a number of editors who have professionally helped me get better at things. Probably the best was the editor for most of the time I wrote for Breaking Muscle. Her name's Becca Borowski Jenkins. Yep. She's excellent. But in terms of the writing, it's I always joke that my aspiration in life is to be like the Clint Eastwood character in Gran Torino. I'm probably not too far away anyway. But so, when I write, that's actually how I talk. So if you let me get going on a subject that I'm passionate about, there's no difference what you're reading than what I would actually be saying if you were in front of me. Yeah. So, and I think, a lot of people are used to people skirting around the issue or, like patting people on the back for mediocrity and sort of accepting that things are not as good as they could be. And that's just not me. So I don't write like that.
Mm. Yeah. And what does the actual process look like? You've obviously got a bit of a routine now. Like if you've got to get an article out, what are your little tips and tricks that get you to do that?
Okay, so there's two possible deadlines here. So one is one that's coming up, and you have an article that comes out easily. And I always find that if you are writing about a subject you know about and that you're passionate about, the article almost writes itself. So 1,500 words is the average length of an internet article, and that'll take an hour. And if it takes much longer than that, it says to me that I don't really know what I'm talking about and I chose the wrong subject, or I chose the wrong slant on that subject, or something about it is wrong.
Yeah.
If I'm really struggling, and there's certainly been times for that. So back at one point with Breaking Muscle, I was writing. There was a point where I had to create 1,000 to 1,500 word article every single day, so 5 days a week for different places. Yeah, and so like there were times where I'd just stare at the screen and be like, what am I going to write today? And so on those days, I would get a family-sized block of Kit Kat and a Red Bull, and I would smash both, and I would just start writing. And so, in terms of the planning process, I can remember in school, we'd have this thing about like key sentences, and then you'd create a few points for each paragraph, and then you have a conclusion. And it doesn't look like that at all. I basically just start writing stuff. and then clean it up as I go. And at the end, and so now because the internet it doesn't actually reward you being perfect. So this is different. If you're putting it in a book, this is different. But if you're writing for the internet doesn't reward you being perfect. The internet rewards you getting content up quickly. So the internet is all about turnover. And so for things like if you're writing and there's a lot of websites that don't pay you, if you're writing for free, well, why do you really care if it's perfect? Just get something up that's got your name and a link back to your website on it, and then let it go. And then create another one, because by the time you create the other one, that first article is already so far pushed down the Facebook feed, no one can even find it anymore.
Yeah.
So, and creating articles, I can think of times where I wrote something and went, oh my God, like this is the smartest thing I've ever written. No other human on the planet is possibly as smart as me. Yeah. It gets like 3 likes. Yeah. And I've written other things like the Red Bull Kit Kat kind of articles where I'm like looking at the clock going, I have an hour and a half to write 1,500 words and I don't even know what I'm going to write about. Just smash out some piece of garbage and it gets like 1,000 likes and 400 shares and there's no rhyme or rhythm to it. So there's no reason to attach any real emotion to it. You just need to get it out. And so much of the way the fitness industry is all about creating ways for people to get to know you before they're ready to purchase training off you. So really those blog articles, it's like walking through a crowd and shaking people's hands basically. As long as it's reasonable and you don't leave a bad taste in their mouth, it's done its job. It doesn't need to be any better than that. It's a sad statement, but that's the truth. These things only exist to get people to feel comfortable with you as a professional so that eventually they'll come and buy something off you later on.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And
it's horrible, and I mean, it makes it look very like seedy. Like there's always an ulterior motive, but no one's putting in hours and hours of free work without hoping they're going to get a payoff at the end of it. They're not just altruistically helping you with every body composition issue you've ever had. The whole goal there is to get some money out of you later on.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Now, being in the industry for some time now, you've obviously been through a lot of the trends and changes. Can you talk about, I guess, the evolution of what the industry was like when you first started, but also, I guess, where it is now? But this is, I guess, a 2-tiered question, so perhaps just start with the first bit.
Yeah, look, it was very easy, relatively. I mean, back then, I can't think of any gym chains. I can think of a couple of gyms where there were maybe the owner had 2 or 3 gyms. So like in Melbourne, there was Recreation. And I think they had 2 gyms. And the company I worked for, A1, had one in Richmond and one in Hampton. And there was no Fitness First or anything like that. And after I'd been at the Richmond A1 for a while, so if you were good at your job, you had to compete with, we had 4 trainers. I think I was the 5th trainer. We had 5 of us. And you only had to compete in front of 2,000 members for 5 spots, basically, for PT. And then Healthland opened up. Healthland became Fitness First later on. So different company, but their gyms got bought out by Fitness First. Suddenly you had a big chain coming in where people could buy a passport membership and travel between multiple locations. So if you're a trainer now, you're not competing against for 2,000 or 3,000 members with, let's say, 10 trainers at each location. You're competing for 6,000 possible members at 5 locations in front of 80 trainers or something. So you'd better be a lot better at your job or a lot better at getting people to notice you. So you see that like the marketing component suddenly went up greatly. Early on, the gym would sell your personal training for you. That doesn't happen anymore. Now Fitness First, you need to be able to sell yourself. And so that was the first big change. And then, we now get to this point now where, and you and I were speaking before we started, I don't have a gym anymore. I got rid of my gym actually just at the end of last month, and I'm solely online now. Yeah. So I'm competing for 7 billion potential customers in front of every other trainer on the planet, basically. So while my training knowledge is one part of the equation, my small business marketing and sales skills have to be substantially better than they were back at the start. Back at the start, I actually did no selling. I used to get sent to sales workshops and be like, I don't even understand why I'm going here. I don't do any selling. The gym does it all for me. Lucky I got sent along because, as it turns out, those are pretty important skills. And so now, in terms of, I feel like most of my job, most of my success revolves around the same things that every small business owner relates to, which is the sales and marketing process. Yeah. I mean, let's face it, for most people are terribly out of shape. The actual mechanics of the training themselves, it's not very complicated. They need to eat a little bit better. They need to be a little bit more active. How you make that up is not terribly important, but getting them to come to you, well, that's the important part. So the change has been solely in the business skills instead of the training skills, which is funny and you know, because you're in the industry too. I mean, how many trainers spend time going to more CEC workshops on, I don't know, boxing, corrective exercise, plyometrics, like whatever? Maybe they should be going to business courses.
That's very true. But I think it's you either sort of sink or swim in that regards. I think you obviously focus on the mechanics, the physiology, everything, the nitty gritty of the courses, and then, you know, 4 or 5 years in, you realize, oh shit, I got to actually sell the shit that I'm learning, and then that's where you go off.
That's the cutoff at the 5-year mark, right? You can survive on not much money and not great business skills for 1 to 5 years. It's not terribly hard. And then all of a sudden you got to make that decision. Am I prepared to keep doing these early starts and the split shifts and the long hours for not much money? Or am I going to get a new job? That's one possibility. Or am I going to learn whatever sales and marketing and business skills I need to actually fix this missing element in my business? And that's probably why you see all those people walk out at the 5-year mark. They make the decision to go do something else.
And is that the, I guess if you were to walk down to one of the big box gyms, whether it's Fitness First or Good Life or whatever it is, what would your advice be to one of the coaches there who's looking to be in it for the long term? You obviously said the marketing advice, but if you were maybe talking about more just the logistical side of training people, where do you think they make mistakes and where do you think they should put their efforts?
Look, I think I remember I helped a Good Life gym here revamp all their stuff. So I came in. I wasn't really the PT manager. They had a PT manager. I was just there to kind of help out and offer some help. And I remember listening to the PT manager say that he felt the number one reason people weren't buying more, like ongoing training, was they weren't entertained. I was like, I think you've got it wrong, mate. Like, I tell you now, like if I buy a product, it doesn't matter what the product is. If I buy a car and the car doesn't work, I'm not buying another car from you. I don't trust you now. If I buy fat loss from you, I better lose some fat. And so, you now have the problems are not necessarily that you don't know how to make someone lose fat. I'm sure you know how to restrict diet and train them and all that kind of stuff. Maybe what you haven't learned is how to communicate with them why they should be doing what you're telling them to do. And so this is, when I look at the biggest problem I think most trainers have is retention. And so like that high sales kind of thing and let's face it, all gym stuff revolves around high sales. There's very little focus on retention, but if you do your job well, let's face it, the bar is not set terribly high in the fitness industry. Yep. If you do your job well, retaining customers is not that hard. I mean, before my gym shut, my average customer had been with me for 4.5 to 5 years. So we would still call like people at 2 years, which would be an incredibly long time for most people to train somewhere in under normal circumstances. 2 years at my gym, you're still a noob. We'd still make fun of you for being a newbie. And, but that kind of retention you only get if you're offering people results. And so, there's so many parts to that are not just, you need to eat this, you need to lift that. It's actually how you relate to the people, and can you make them comfortable? Can you get them to buy into what they actually need to do? And that's probably the hardest part of the job is, like if I'm talking to you about fat loss, I can deliver it to you one way, but I turn to the person next to you and I have to do something completely different with them just to get them to do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Because we all relate to things differently.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a huge point. I've spoke a lot about it on this podcast, and just the word communication and how you relate to people. And it's something I guess you learn as a coach as you go, and you can see the people that you might be successful with, and you can see obviously the mistakes that you've made. But how do you think you would explain that to someone who was trying to start out, and you say, okay, it's about connecting. It's not just the message that you're saying, it's about how you say it. but what is there a specific resource or a book or a person online that you'd I guess recommend?
I may be in a slightly weird position. So before I started PTing, I actually got a hotel management degree from a fancy place in Switzerland. Okay. So my tertiary education is actually in customer service, basically.
Okay.
I got lucky and did some marketing, some HR stuff, some accounting as part of that, but largely the overriding focus of the entire course is customer service. And then you go and work in 5-star hotels in Switzerland, and these are the kind of places where if you say, I feel like pterodactyl eggs for breakfast, they'll figure it out. Versus I can remember coming home here to the Hilton, and I was the supervisor in the bar, and it was Melbourne Cup or like Spring Racing Carnival, and these guys had a big win and they wanted these particular bottles of wine. We had them. I could see it on the system, but they were locked up in like the cellar. The cellar was actually about 20 meters away from the back of the bar, and my boss had the keys. And I said, look, like, we don't have it behind the bar, but I can see we've got them on the system. If you give me the keys, I'll go get them. And this one sale, 3 bottles of wine was our entire profit for the week. I only had to go and walk 20 meters there and 20 meters back, and we would have made our entire profit for the week. And he said, nah, sell them something else. I couldn't be bothered. Like, are you kidding me? And so that's not a customer service mindset, right? So when you want to show people that you care, I mean, to an extent, I think you either have that in you or you don't. And you can certainly see that in Australia in retail and hospitality. I don't think we're very good at either. But if you go somewhere like Asia or the US where they work for tips, and the average wage is a lot lower, you can see people who really care about whether or not you have a good time. I have one customer, and so, if you look at my writing, I look quite angry. But what you don't see is that it's driven from a place where I actually really care about people getting the right result and not getting hurt, being healthy. So one of my customers, a long-term guy, a guy who actually I've probably had not the most problems with, but would be right up there. One Christmas found himself in hospital. Actually he got an infection in his back, and it was poorly diagnosed. It was allowed to spread, and ended up in hospital for 2 weeks over Christmas and New Year's. I went and visited him every day. So I was there on Christmas morning. I was there the next day, and so on and so on. He got released on New Year's Eve, but I was 100% prepared to be there at 9 o'clock on New Year's Day to visit him on New Year's Day. And I think if you don't have that kind of commitment to your clients to show them that, hey, I'm in this with you, because really the only way you're successful as a trainer is if your customer is successful. And if they're not successful, then you're not going to be. And if you're not prepared to go to that kind of level for them, to answer a call at 8 o'clock on Sunday night, no matter how annoying it is, because someone really needs your help or they're really upset, you're probably not going to make it, to be honest.
Yeah. And I guess now you're moving into that online space. You must see a lot of I guess red flags with other guys that you're competing against. What should people, I guess, look out for and avoid online? What's something that, I guess, ticks you off when you see people selling stuff? And obviously you come from a good place, and that you trying to help people. What is there anything that comes to mind with that?
Yeah, look, I hate to rag on younger trainers, but when you see someone who's about 30 years old telling you how they've trained thousands of people, it's impossible. They can't have. The math doesn't work out. I mean, a busy week for a trainer is like 30 hours of training. If you're hitting 30 or 40 hours of training people in a week, you are exhausted at the end of the week. The amount of positive energy that you have to put out to train people for that many hours a week is incredible. That is, go home at the end of the day and don't talk until the next day. That's get to the end of the week and collapse and not be able to do anything until you have to do it all again on Monday. Like the amount of effort that goes into that kind of week is incredible. And even if you had a brand new client for every one of those hours for an entire year, you would only train, what's 40 times 50? You'd only train 800 people. Is that right?
Yeah.
4 or 5. No, you train 2,000 people. Okay. If you had that's not the way. That's not the way clients work. Like, you'll have a client for anywhere from, in most cases, like 3 to 12 months. And so your 40 hours are probably made up of about 30 people that are largely the same for chunks and chunks of time. So you might actually only train 30 or 40 people in a month.
Yeah.
So, when I see these guys going, well, I've helped thousands of people, you can't have. It's impossible.
Yeah.
So, and straight away when I see that, I'm like, well, how many other things is this guy not being honest about? And the nature of training, because I've been around and I see people particularly claiming exercises. Oh, I invented this. No, you didn't. Paul Chek was doing that back in 98. Or, no, look at this thing. Yeah, I've got that in a book by Ian King from 96. And there's this other thing. Yeah, well, someone was doing that in the 60s. And, so much stuff that people say they've invented, you just haven't. It's impossible.
Yeah.
While we have a few more tools now than people had previously, in terms of the way the body moves, nothing much has changed. I bet if you went back, geez, you'd probably find most of it in Chinese martial arts or, there's nothing new.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I see, I've been in the industry as long as you. I've probably been about 15 years, but I see, it's quite funny just through social media. I see a lot of guys that might have been in for 5 years and they're trying to sell me their marketing systems and their Facebook ads come up and I'm like, I remember, working in a gym with you and you couldn't, get 10 clients, let alone now you're trying to help me with my business. So kind of...
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. I mean, all the guys want to give you business advice. And my first question is, where's your gym? Like, you're so successful at running a gym. Where's your gym? There's a bunch of guys here who are business coaches that I know and their gym's folded. I would certainly never give someone advice on how to run a gym. If mine was super successful, I'd still be doing it. But I couldn't make it work the way I wanted it to. And actually, the way I deliver training now works far better for me, and I've got a lot less expenses. So, but I would never offer business coaching because what's my experience? My experience is I shut my gym.
Yeah. But you had that for a while though, like that was operating, or for yeah.
Well, what happened with expenses was the the owners corporation stuff just was getting more and more and more. Like I paid in the first 2 months of this year $11,000 just in owners corporation stuff on top of like $9,000 for rent. And so we all know January, February is pretty quiet for training. So I was paying an enormous amount in expenses at a time when I really didn't have a lot of customers here. So, when I started looking at it and I was thinking of ways I could round out things, and I've realized I spend a lot of time traveling to teach workshops. And while I don't dislike working with trainers, teaching workshops is certainly good. It's good for the ego. I see why people do it. You get to stand in front of a room full of people and they'll tell you how clever you are. I feel like I don't need that kind of validation. I'm pretty secure with who I am.
Yeah.
And what I really like is I like working with people. I like training people.
Yeah.
And so I wanted a way that allowed me to train the kind of people that I want, and actually online allows me to do that. It means and I don't like managing staff. I find them I don't find their passion matches mine. Their work ethic never matches mine. So that frustrates me. And really the only way I'm happy is when people get what they want. This is the customer service thing. I'm only happy when the customer actually gets in shape.
Yeah.
So the only way to do that was to remove all the blocks between me and people. So like if I teach a workshop to trainers, it's Chinese whispers. They go out and they take what I said and they mess it up. Or I could just go straight to that person. I could do it right the first time. So the only way I could actually deliver this stuff as well as possible to as many people as possible was to get rid of everything that was in the way, including the bricks and mortar facility that I use. So most of my clients now are actually not Australian. They're all from all over the world.
Okay, that's interesting. Can you take us through the principles of what it's like working with you specifically? I mean, it doesn't have to be online, but what are the key areas that you focus on when you first get someone signed up, and the fundamentals that you follow?
So in person, it was FMS. So you come in, first session, we do an FMS screen on top of, so we've obviously gone back and forth on the phone and make sure I think you're going to be a good fit. That's actually, so the first step is not FMS. The first step is, do I think we can get along? Yeah. Because there will be times when, for instance, my girlfriend is a firefighter. So depending on shifts and things like that, there would be weeks where I would spend more time with certain clients than I would with my own partner who I live with, just because of, night shift or whatever. So if I don't think we can get along, we can't work together. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we need to start from somewhere, and it doesn't matter where that somewhere is, as long as you can have a rationale for it. So now online, I don't do an FMS screen, but the first month of training is actually very mild. And it's not, I don't want to say easy, that's the wrong word, but it allows them to, set a standard for what's expected later on. So there's a bunch of kind of test workouts that are done, and they give you some numbers to work from to really create some strong programs later on. So you've got, you know definitely where they start from, and then allows you to program. Like, so if someone comes in and, let's say, for instance, they said they want to get stronger and fitter, and so this is, we've all heard that, and toned is the other thing that gets thrown in there, right? Most people don't even know what stronger and fitter means. They don't have a number for it. Maybe exercise people do. Or they say, I want to run a faster 5K or something. But most people don't have an actual number. So you can go, okay, well, we'll do a 2K row. We'll do like max push-ups. We can do, you know what I mean? We'll put some test things in there and actually see where you're up to. And a couple of things happens. One, they blitz through everything. Great, you clap your hands together. You've got an awesome person to train who can do everything. That's someone who's going to be great fun to work with. Have at it. Two, they come in and let's say, I don't know, they bench press a house and they can do all this other stuff, and they do a 2K row and you can time it with a sundial. Yeah. Okay, I know how I can make you better because you're not very fit, and so you're actually going to get the greatest result from our training by focusing on some fitness stuff. The opposite might be true. Maybe they come in and, I don't know, they run like a sub 20-minute 5K, but they can't lift a pencil. All right, I know how to fix you too, because I just need to look at your weaknesses. Those are the things we're going to work on. That's how I can have the best result. And then the final thing is they do, let's say it's bench press, and they go, bench really hurts my shoulders. All right, now I know what your problem is, and your problem is actually a function problem. So now we need to, and so I'm starting to put people into buckets, basically, and go, okay, you're in the fitness bucket, you're in the strength bucket, you're in the corrective exercise kind of bucket, and now we can start to figure out really what the plan is, because training is so much like dating to a lot of extent. People will come in and they'll show you their first date behavior. They won't tell you that, I don't know, they're into all this weird kinky stuff, or they won't show you the bad. They won't show you that they never shower or they don't brush their teeth. Or no one sees that on the first date. No. And so clients will come in and they'll be on first date behavior, but you can't hide that for very long. And by the time you get through a good month of training, which for us, that's 24 sessions. So it's 3 strength, 3 cardio sessions for online. That's 6 sessions a week. Boom. And so this is part of the initial talk is, if you're not prepared to train 6 times a week, I can't help you. And
so
by the time
straight away, you're just, I guess, cutting away a lot of the people that they can't commit to that.
Well, you're either serious or you're not. Yeah. And so for the amount of money I charge for online, they're all serious. No one's not serious. So that, we get through 24 workouts. I know you pretty well by now. And online, I see everything. I see every meter that you rode, every second that it took, every rep. There's none of this, because in a group training session, maybe 10 people are training at once. And so if you're in the gym and I had you over on the rowing machine, for instance, I probably wouldn't spend a lot of time with you if you were doing, I don't know, like let's say 500-meter intervals on the rower, because you can't hurt yourself. The worst that can happen is you get really, really tired and you collapse off the rower into a heaving heap on the ground. Yep. It's not like you're going to pass out or, nothing bad's going to happen. So I'm more likely to spend my time with the person who's deadlifting or squatting, someone who actually might be at risk with what they're doing. Yeah. Online, I see every single interval that you did on the rower. And so I can say, hey, man, what was going on with reps 6, 7, and 8? Like, your numbers are, you're 20, 25 meters down on each one of those. Like, why'd you give up? What's going on? Yeah. And because you can't hide any of that, I see everything. And so we get to the end of the first month, I know you pretty well. We get to the end of the second month, I probably know you better than your own partner does. I will tell you when my clients have had bad sleep. I see their HRV. I know if they've been walking. I know how much they've eaten. I see absolutely everything. Yeah. So, but if you don't start from somewhere, I want to say sensible, somewhere where, you can't hurt someone, but you're still able to challenge them, you've got nowhere to go. I mean, if we started with, I don't know, Murph, for instance, right? I mean, where do people go after that? Either they can do it or they can't, but it's kind of a hard test to begin with. I mean, most people aren't going to be able to do that to begin with, so you probably went too hard.
Yeah.
So, if we start, this was an Ian King thing. If you start with a minimum, it's easy to add more. If you start with something more and you don't get the result you want, is the answer more or less? And that's the problem. But if we start down the bottom and we don't get the answer we want, the answer obviously is more.
Yeah.
And so if we started working out with one set per exercise and we didn't get a result, well, let's do more.
Yeah.
But what if we start with 5 sets per exercise and we don't get the answer we want? Is the answer not enough work, or is the answer too much work?
Yeah. It's true.
So set yourself up so you've only got one direction to go in.
Yeah. And when you're saying that you can see every rep, every set, are you doing this? Are you getting them to record this on their mobile phone? How does this work?
Oh, some of it. So, obviously I've spent a lot of time around people. So I know if you weigh this and you deadlift this, I'll know roughly how many pull-ups you should be able to get.
Yeah.
As an example. And so, one of the guys who's, sending me, well, I'm deadlifting 120 for 3 and he weighs 85. So that's not bad. He does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so his back's under some stress just with his hobby. So like he's not going to be a guy who deadlifts an awful lot. But then we get to pull-ups and he says he's doing 32 kilo pull-ups. I'm like, for reps, that's
some
unusual.
Serious strength, yeah.
Well, yeah, but so at his weight, a 32 kilo pull-up for a single, I would expect. And for someone who's only deadlifting 120, I actually wouldn't expect him to get any at 32, maybe like 20 to 25 kilo. But so I said, hey, this is unusual. Why don't you video those and send me the next set? And sure enough, he's getting like his nose above the bar. So, I was like, no, man, like if your chest doesn't touch the bar, it's not a rep. And suddenly he's back down to about 15 kilo. So, because at the end of the day, the weight doesn't matter. But, and so I'll look at things and, often we'll see numbers off people and go, like what's another example? So someone's squatting, say 3 reps at a given weight, and then they go to like 7 or 8 reps. And so obviously the difference in weight should be quite substantial between those two. Mm-hmm. And yet it's maybe only 10 pounds different. And so, because it's all recorded and I can click back and forth between workouts and make sure I'm not imagining things. I go, hey, I know that you're actually capable of more. Why don't you send me video of both sets so I can see what's going on? So, I don't obviously see the workout while it's going on. So it does take away. I used to say that the greatest power I had as a trainer was nothing technical. It was actually just my eyes. So as you walk into the gym, I see how tired you are. I see if you're walking funny. I see if you're happy. I can tell straight away whether we're going to have a good workout or not just by looking at you when you come in, because I've gotten to know you so well. And so online, I miss that, and I don't get it at the start of the workout or during the workout, but I get it at the end of every workout. So while I can't stop the damage now, if you come in and you're a mess, I can stop you making it worse. And so it's quite common that people will, they'll have a workout that's not what they were hoping for. And in the system that I use in Training Peaks, you can have a conversation with someone a little bit like Facebook Messenger. So you can go back and forth about different things. And, we'll see, I had 5 hours sleep, my kid was sick, blah, blah, whatever it happens to be. No problem. And I'll just start pulling things out from the next 2 or 3 days to allow them to recover and come back, because I'd rather give up 1 or 2 days to an easy/moderate session than drill them tomorrow when they're fatigued and maybe make them sick for 7 to 10 days afterwards. So this communication, again, is the thing we go back to, is not just now, am I getting you to buy in, but am I really paying attention to what you're saying? As an example, another guy had an event on the weekend that I don't think he was hoping for. In fact, I know it wasn't the result he was hoping for, but his feet got terribly blistered during the event, like a blister that ran like half the length of his foot and was maybe a centimeter high. It was a massive blister. Clearly you're not walking comfortably like that. And it was a 12-hour event, it's called Go Ruck, so it's like a military-themed event. And because it was based around the D-Day kind of stuff, it would have been probably a little bit harder than normal. They were clearly in sand as well if they were blistering like that. And he just wasn't prepared for that. But the language that he used when talking about it really negative, really down on himself. And I just know if we'd been having that conversation in person, like his body language would have been awful. But so clearly that guy doesn't need a "you suck, kick you in the ass" kind of workout. He needs a pat on the back. He needs to rest. We need to build him back up again. We need to give him something that he's comfortable with, and actually just get him back to a place where, and let's leave the fitness side out of it, where he's actually just happy with himself again. Yeah. So, you know, that actually paying attention to what the clients are saying. Who would have thought that was such an important thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And rather than just forcing stuff.
Customer service works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I am not scared to take things off people. So whether that's take weight off you today so you don't hurt yourself, whether that's do less sets, whether that's have an easy day tomorrow, like the biggest thing I found. So I mostly focus on 40-plus-year-old guys. I train a handful of girls who are all amazing, but most of my clients are 40-plus-year-old guys. The biggest problem is stress, right? And stress comes in many forms. And this is the thing that people mistake, is that they feel like working out is stress relief. It's not. It's just stress. Your body can't tell the difference between lack of sleep, your kid being in hospital, your boss on your back, and workout. That's all just stress, the way your body looks at it. Yeah. And so the only way we can actually make you improve, so if you're stressed up to your eyeballs, if I want you to adapt and improve, I need you to have at least a little bit of space left over for recovery and super compensation, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're maxed out for stress and you're maxed out for your recovery ability, no amount of training right now is actually going to make you better. It's actually just going to make you worse. So in a lot of cases, you have to learn to dial it back, give people less sets, less reps, drop the weight down. No one believes it when they start training with me. But so this first month I've talked about, which is it's moderate in terms of how hard it is. You don't get to work at anything harder than 50% of what your first week test workouts are for the entire month. 50%. And every single person PRs at the end of that month. Yeah. And I let them go above 50%. Yeah. So what does that say about how stressed they are coming into the program with how much training they're doing? I cut 50% of the workout. I never let them work very hard. Their RPE is no higher than a 5 or 6 out of 10, and they all PR at the end of the month.
Yeah, it's huge. I've seen you wrote an article recently, or maybe it was a post on social media that you talk about the 5-2-1 workout and the percentages, and you went on a bit of a rant about how you're not actually supposed to be at your grind out sets. Do you remember writing that one?
No. Yeah. Look, I mean, so there is so much similarity. If you look at endurance training and strength training, there are way more similarities than differences. So this is, when I look at a lot of what people comment on, they don't understand either. Not many people have actually gone off and done both. Like I felt like I was lacking some experience with endurance work. So I went off and did Ironman. I went off and hired a triathlon coach. You know what I mean? Like I went and hung out with world champion marathon runners and triathletes and learnt endurance training. Yeah. And at high level strength stuff, I went and hired a guy who got a silver medal at the Olympics to teach me about strength at the highest possible level I could learn it. You've only got one nervous system. It responds the same way to training, regardless of what the activity really is. And you can look at research on endurance and you can look at research on strength, and it all says the same thing, is that about 80% of your training should be at 70% or below of your maximum. Mm-hmm. So there's a study by a guy called Seilor, Seilor. It's a multi-year, 20-year study across multiple sports. So it's cross-country skiing, rowing, running, and cycling and swimming. And they found that 80% of the work for these guys done at 70% or less of max heart rate was the most beneficial training. When they went to something like 50-50, for instance, the loss in fitness was actually more profound than sitting on the couch and doing nothing for 6 weeks. So, when you look at other people's training, and this is, again, what I was saying about how stressed are people are trying to, you look at a typical CrossFit kind of workout where I'm going to do a WOD, I'm going to compete, I'm going to go to my max, workout after workout after workout, every day of the week. So you're at 100% 5 days in a row. In the same week, an elite athlete would have done that once. right? If you're in a pro sport team, you play at your max once a week on the weekend. Spend the rest of the week building fitness, you test it once. And here we are with our moderate genetics, our moderate recovery abilities, no full-time physio, but a full-time job with kids keeping us up at night, and we wonder why we're not getting anywhere when we go into 100% 5 times in a row. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
If you look at strength, the magic number for strength, so everything that you read is basically based off Russian research, and what they found was that it was 72% of your max plus or minus 2% as average intensity year-round. Now, when you look at a lot of training programs based off Russian stuff, they'll tell you use 80%. But the thing they're forgetting is Russian training percentages were built off not a competition max, but like a training max. And so they already took 90% of your competition max and they used that as 100%. What's 80 times 90? It's 72, right?
Yeah.
So while you might be seeing these programs saying 80, 80, 80, what they're really saying is 80% of 90%. It comes out as about 70%. And so most of your training should be around 70%. That might mean if you want to go do a workout where you work up to a new max after 3 or 4 months of prep work, to balance that out, you might need, and so we have a guy, I train a guy, he's a 2-time world powerlifting champion. And he showed one workout he did. It was 25 sets of sub-max work to hit 3 sets of 2 at 90%.
Yeah, wow.
To buffer it all out. And so this is, to do the hard stuff, you need the easy stuff. And so this is when, you read people who don't really understand endurance training, for instance, and they talk about junk miles. They don't understand there are no junk miles. There are low-effort base kilometers to allow you to sustain the hard work for later on. Tabata is another great example of that. So when you do the math on the Tabata study, it's 80 minutes a week of low-intensity, sub-70% max heart rate work, and it's 4 minutes times 5. It's 20 minutes, but it's not really 20 minutes because it's only 20 seconds at a time, so it's actually 40 seconds out of every 60 seconds. So it ends up being like 16 minutes a week of high-intensity work versus 80 minutes of low-intensity work. That's pretty close to the 80-20 we were talking about before, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the most famous anaerobic study in the world actually shows you that to make it work, you need 80% easy effort. So the overwhelming thing that my guys get used to is never feeling like they're crushed. But then when they pick an event and I let them off the leash, they all go out and they run bests. I've had guys run like 6-minute PRs over half marathons. Guys make the podium at Spartan races. I've got someone running a half marathon this weekend. I fully expect her to run a PR, even though she doesn't think she's about to. She doesn't know me well enough to know that I already know what's going to happen. Yeah. So the people think you've got to kill yourself all the time, and you just don't. The best athletes in the world peak once a year. So who are you to try to peak 5 days a week? It's just not going to happen, and you will go to a point and then never any further. Yeah. If you really want to get to the highest level, you need to learn to not take it easy, but you need to learn to work moderately, but a lot.
Well, I think it gets also like just glamorized for social media. Everyone wants to post their big numbers and sort of get more likes, and they get sucked into that whole thing. And I deal with a lot of corporate sort of A-type personalities, and it's often quite difficult to tell those guys to put the brakes on because they're high achievers in their corporate life, and then you tell them, okay, well, we've got to back it off this week, and they sort of look at you a bit like I'm here to work hard. But I think over the long haul they understand that. How do you deal with that, and what I guess strategies do you use personally to reduce the stress level that we spoke about before for the clients and making them to recover?
I think of what you're talking about. I have to break people. It sounds terrible. I don't mean break like destroy them. I mean like mentally I need them to get on my team. That can take, some people are instant and some people like 2 years. So it can be a slow process. But now online, I've got it down to one sentence. And it's, are you paying me to get tired and sore, or are you paying me to get better?
Yeah.
Simple. So if you want to get better, do it my way. If you want to be tired and sore, do it your way. Yeah. So you didn't pay me to just be tired. You paid me to, run a PR. You paid me to hit this event, whatever it happened to be. And that's our goal. And so to hit that goal, I need you to focus on what I'm doing. So you pay me to be tired, or you pay me to be better. In terms of reducing the stress so that things actually work, I wrote, so you said I have a book. I actually have two.
Yeah.
And technically now I have a third. So I have a kettlebell book with Dragon Door. There's the running book that is mine.
Yeah.
And there's also this other book that I have written just for clients. I have to say I think it's actually the best thing I've written, but I only give it to clients. And it's always interesting. People are like, oh, I'll give you however much money you think it's worth. Well, okay, like training with me is $1,000 for 3 months, so I think it's worth $1,000. And if you're prepared to give me $1,000, I'll hand it to you.
Yeah.
And in it, it doesn't have anything fancy in it. It's got sleep, it's got walking, it's got how to structure your diet. And there's a lot of research in it, and it's like 15,000 words. It's no small thing. The guys who follow it, so the test case for this, it's called 8743. So it's 8 hours of sleep, 7 walks a week, 4 good meals a day, and 3 cardiovascular sessions a week.
Yeah.
And really simple stuff. The first guy to test it for me lost 8 kilo in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, he had obviously not been eating well. You don't lose 8 kilo because everything's going great. But simply by sleeping more, going for a walk every day, and tidying up his food, he lost 8 kilo in 3 weeks. And the cardiovascular stuff is not kill it Tabata kind of stuff. It's actually just go and do some steady state stuff for set periods of time.
Yeah.
The sort of results that if I hadn't been personally involved in it, I would have said were impossible, bullshit. There's no way that's actually happening, but it's that powerful. And when we have, always with my guys, so one of the guys, he's a firefighter. He's studying as well, so he's got exams at the moment. His second child has just been born like 2 weeks ago. He also happens to be a small business owner. He owns a Brazilian jiu-jitsu school. This guy's got a lot on, and it gives us a place to come back to and go, okay, so everything else has to go out the window. We need to go back to a focus on food quality. We need to go back to a focus on getting some extra sleep. And when all that stuff is in place, because so many people are going, oh, I want this 1% thing over here. Mate, who cares? Like, honestly, you're not Kobe Bryant, you're not Michael Phelps. Like, who cares, right? Just go to bed earlier, because that's our primary stress recovery mechanism. And if you're not doing that, then nothing's going to work after that. So, I mean, sleep as an example. So at 6 hours or less of sleep a night, in Australia, the legal alcohol limit for driving is 0.05 blood alcohol concentration. Mm-hmm. So it's meant to be like a drink an hour is what gets you 0.05. So it's really not a huge amount of alcohol. And 6 hours or less of sleep a night actually makes you more impaired for motor control than being 0.05. So in other words, your motor control is worse behind the wheel of a car at 6 hours of sleep than it is if you're too drunk to drive. Right? So forget the stress-related part. Let's have a think about public safety for a second. There are a bunch of people out there who are basically just waiting for an accident by driving around courtesy of not having had enough sleep. So on so many levels, I think those people are risking the rest of us needlessly. They're risking their kids who are in the car with them. At 5 hours of sleep or less, your risk of obesity doubles. Your risk of depression doubles. So, always when I start working with people, like, oh, I'm really struggling with this, I'm really struggling with that, and like what sort of BCAA should I have, and I'm taking this creatine, but you're getting 4.5 hours of sleep a night. None of that matters. Like you're worrying about this tiny little thing over here that may help you later on. Those supplemental things are supplements. That means in addition to. It doesn't mean instead of. We got to get these basics in place first. The basics are food, walk. The human body is designed to work for 5 to 8 hours a day of gentle activity. We used to have to forage for food for 15 to 18 kilometers a day to find enough energy to survive. And here we are saying 10,000 steps is enough. I'll tell you now, it's about 5,000 steps is 3 kilometers of walking for me, roughly. So it's not 10,000 steps a day. It's a lot more than that is how far we should be moving. Walking has got on the nervous system, has got a really settling effect. So the Japanese did a study showing that it's got a 10% boost on your HRV going for a half-hour walk in nature. So, you pull your earphones out, no phone, no distractions, just go for a walk in a park for half an hour, and your body actually thanks you for it. So there are ways we can moderate stress.
Yeah.
But if we don't have a system to use it and we don't have a framework, and so within this book, there's actually a score sheet that goes with it. So you get points attached to each thing. You get a maximum possible score for the week. And so when someone's saying, I'm really not getting X with my training results, I was really hoping this would happen, I can just go, well, what's your score for the week? A normal kind of score is low 40s. No, 50 is the maximum score you can get the way it's set up. No one can get 50. It's impossible.
Yeah.
If you got 50, you're probably like a psychopath or something, and you're probably murdering. You'd have to be so methodical to get a 50. It would be next to impossible to get. But low 40s is possible. And if you're telling me you're getting high 20s, for instance, well, of course training's not working. You're not set up for it to work. I mean, you're spending money you don't have. You need to make sure all this stuff is working for you. So that's the first thing we go to. And then, this process of actually listening to the way customers are talking, the things they're saying about themselves. Obviously, in the short term, I mean, you can survive burning the candle at both ends, but in the long term, that's a poor solution. So my guy who's got the new kid and the babies and, the exams and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The next 2 weeks, he has just every other day, he does half hour of easy cardio. That's it for the next couple of weeks until exams are over. Then he's actually going on leave, and we can rebuild from there. But the next couple of weeks, we're not trying to get fitter for the next couple of weeks. The guy's 42 years old with 2 kids, a full-time job, a part-time job, and part-time study. He's got enough. If we can just use the cardio to help settle him down and to not lose too much, that's good enough for right now.
Yeah. Yeah, can we just talk about? I've just seen a couple of videos online of your probably one of your best clients, who's your mum, and her deadlift prowess, and what she's able to do. Obviously follows your principles in training, but I've trained family members and partners before, and I know how hard it can be. But
technically I only train a family member. None of the others want to listen to me. So I feel your pain. She is the only one who trains with me. None of the rest of my family want to listen to me. So
yeah. Can you just talk about just her numbers and how old she is and the rest?
Yeah. Okay. So she's 76. She's 51 kilo. So she competes at 51.5 kilo or under. So she's 51 kilo. Her best deadlifting competition is 85 kilo. She is world champion, world record holder in her category. Now, I have to be honest and say there's not too many 75-year-old women wanting to deadlift. At the world champs, there is, I think, so we went 2 years ago. We're going again this year. It's in Orlando this year, so we're a bit excited because we're going to go to Disneyland after. I think she was oldest or equal oldest. There's not too many people at that age still active, and what you see is bench press is gone, squats gone, because like shoulders and knees and stuff can't deal with it anymore. Yeah. But they're still deadlifting. In terms of the training, it started because she wanted to maintain her drive for golf. So she's always hit the ball a long way. Her handicap has been, she got down to, I think 9 was the best. She just made single figures. She played golf pretty well. And then always wanted to maintain like how far she could hit the ball and keep her handicap as good as possible. So we started strength training. I had been doing other stuff with her for a long time, but we really focused on strength training. In 2012, when you came to FMS, were we at the red gym or the white gym?
The red gym.
Yeah, okay. So when I moved there, or actually just before there, I had been in Richmond, and she was training with me there. So she'd been training with me for a little bit there. And for her 70th birthday, we just set a fun goal of, hey, wouldn't it be funny if you deadlifted 70 for your 70th birthday?
Yeah.
And so she hit that. And then the next year, so she turned 71. And I said, well, you're stronger now than you were last year, so you have to hit 75 this year for 71. And she did that. And, we're all kind of high-fiving each other and dancing around and whatever. And I was goofing around. I grabbed my phone and I thought I'd look up world records. And we realized she was only 2.5 kilo off the world record.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, like no belt, no real specific training. We just worked up to a single on one particular day. There was no, we hadn't actually set a real goal and worked towards it. We just did this off the cuff at the gym. And then she decided she'd enter a powerlifting competition. So she got 80 at her first powerlifting competition, broke the world record. That was nationals, I don't know, 4 years ago. She qualified for Worlds. It was in Australia that year. And we went to Worlds. She'd had some back problems from actually travel. Mm-hmm. Being stuck in airplanes and long periods of driving cars to see different things and just hadn't sort of unstiffened. And so we've been fighting that the whole time. And on her first lift at the Worlds that year, she tore both hamstrings. So that took about 2 years to fix. And then we went back we did, what did we do? There must have been maybe a Queen's birthday meet or something at Slaughterhouse, which is close by. And then she qualified for Worlds again and went to Worlds that year, which was 2 years ago, and lifted 85, so broke her own world record by 5 kilo.
Oh, wow.
And then, so the goal this year is 90. So we're hoping to hit 90 kilo this year at Worlds.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Now, yeah, look, she's a 51 kilo. She's tiny, little old lady, you know, and she still hits the golf ball really far.
Yeah.
She walks every day. She deadlifts. She's in really good shape for someone her age, and all her friends. It's always funny. She tells me all the time, "Oh, my friends keep asking what I do," and she says, "Oh, I lift weights," and they say, "Well, I do too." And then she asks, and they're talking about 4-pound dumbbells or something.
Little
She's
pink dumbbells.
You've got, and one of them even says, "Oh, well, I do kettlebells." And my mum, she does swings with a 20 or a 24, depending on. She farmers walks 24s, nearly body weight.
Yeah.
And so her friend's like, "Oh, well, I use a 4 kilo kettlebell," and my mum's like, "My gym, the smallest I had was an 8," and she's like, "Do they even come that small? I've never seen a kettlebell that small." Funny. So, the only thing I will really say about our training is people would be shocked how we train. We actually don't lift an awful lot. We spend a lot more time making sure her body works properly. So she's got a warm up that I built for her that gets her back and hamstrings and everything working properly, so we don't have those problems that we had before. She's got a stretching program that she does at home. She treats herself as much like an elite athlete as you can in your 70s. So she actually does something every day. She only lifts twice a week, but coming up to a big comp, she does 3 days a week. But we actually only lift on one of those days. On the other 2 days, it's basically moderate circuit training more than anything. So people would actually be surprised about how little work there is. But when you're if you deadlift, 500 kilo, you've got big work capacity. If you deadlift 200, you could do tons of reps at 200 and it wouldn't even touch the surface. When your max is 80, 85, you really can't do too much work. She's really only got 12 to 15 sets of work in her on any given day. And so we can't use it all up every session. So actually the training is a lot more moderate than what a lot of people would probably think. But her recoverability is a lot more moderate than what most people would be used to. There's not too many people at 70 still training. I've actually got another guy at 73 who I train as well. And he also does about 12 to 15 sets per workout. So, the total amount of work, I think, is the thing that people really want to pay attention to. But this idea that people get old and they've got to, stop having fun or stop being active, that's not true at all. She's still out there playing golf 3 days a week, and she trains 2 or 3 days a week, and she walks other days, and you know what I mean? She's got a very active lifestyle for someone her age.
Yeah, and I think her success is testament to your principles that she follows and places a big emphasis on recovery, not just grinding out big sets, and that's obviously why she can lift the big sets at the championship meets. Now being a peak performer, I'm interested on what you do on a sort of daily basis to operate. So can you just run us through your day, any habits, routines that you do, and what are your sort of non-negotiables for each day?
Well, Okay, so I should probably, because I've only been without the gym for a week, so I'm actually I'm a little bit still in holiday mode because like I'm not used to having that, like not having to get up early. So rather than talk about the last week, I'll talk about what I've done for about the last decade or so. So I would normally get up at 5. I have a standard joint mobility warm-up that all the clients do when they come in. So if you've ever come and trained with us, you'll see my clients kind of, rubbing their eyes as they come into the gym first thing in the morning. And then like zombies, everyone just starts kind of doing this thing. And because we don't train as a group, we train with other people there, but everyone's doing their own program anyway. So while breakfast is starting to cook, I'm doing this joint mobility thing. So I spend the first 10 minutes preparing breakfast plus doing joint mobility. Have breakfast, go down to the gym, work at the gym till, like 8 o'clock usually. And then we usually train myself. So there's something, and that will depend on the day. It's probably got a lot more flexibility and mobility stuff than most people do. But one of the things I've learned along the way is basically people, have you ever noticed like people are either really supple or they're not? So either you've got a nervous system that allows you to work into a great range or you don't. I have spent a lot of time being punched and thrown into the ground and stuff for fun because I have done martial arts since I was 10. My body tends towards stiffness. If I just lift weights, I tend more towards stiffness. So I have to make sure I do a lot of mobility work because otherwise I'm going to get to 50 or 60 and not be able to tie my shoes. So there's active rest between every set of every exercise. There's always some mobility work. So I spend out of any, let's say 60-minute training session, let's be honest, maybe 20 minutes of that is actually lifting and there's 40 minutes of mobility stuff. There's usually something else later in the day in terms of training, whether it's just go for a walk or there's some slightly higher steady state cardio. One thing I barely ever do myself is any kind of interval work because I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and it's basically all interval work and it's all very high intensity. I don't feel like I need a lot of high intensity fitness work on top of that. I spend a lot of time buffering that out and trying to do more steady state stuff. I certainly feel much better when I do more steady state stuff. And then I guess the only other thing is food and sleep. And so food I tend to eat. I eat roughly the same time every day. I eat roughly the same things every day. Sleep, I try to get 8 hours sleep a night. I mean, there's nothing unusual going on. It's very routine, as anyone who works in the fitness industry will tell you. I mean, we have set start and set finish times. Our time comes in sort of 1 hour blocks. There's a lot of opportunity for routine, certainly not like, I don't know, being a firefighter or something like that. The big things I do, though, are make sure – so my view on training is always that if I think it's important, it should be important for my clients and vice versa. So if I'm telling my clients, hey, you need to go to bed earlier, I need to go to bed earlier too. If I'm saying you need to cut alcohol, well, I shouldn't be drinking a heap either. So, there's like integrity and consistency with the message. And that if I'm saying, hey, you need to walk 30 minutes a day, I walk 30 minutes a day. If I'm saying you need to stretch at least 1-to-1 for the time you spend lifting, then I do the same thing. So what I'm trying to do is follow my own system as closely as possible. And I guess the results work okay. I'm in pretty good shape for 46.
Yeah, absolutely. And are there any sort of breathing drills or meditation sort of practices that you use yourself? I know there's a big component in FMS that they talk about the mechanics of breathing and obviously why it's important. But is there any specific drills that you follow?
Have you seen, by the way, they've actually got a breathing course now, which is excellent. So if you haven't seen that because you've done the course, you should have access to it. It's certainly worth having a look at. It's got some great information in there. I tend to do, so one of my sort of go-to stretching things is like a yoga workout, which, I went along to a bunch of yoga classes, like when I say a bunch, like 6 months of 3 days a week of yoga with a guy who is both a very good yoga instructor as well as a jiu-jitsu black belt. So I guess I felt that he was kind of untying the same sort of knots that I was untying, given we were doing the same activity, and following the kind of breathing practices I got from there. But the breathing stuff is deep diaphragmatic breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, nice and long, relaxed breathing. I've learned some other things about sort of relaxation breathing along the way, like flexion-based postures, downward dog, for instance, is far better than extension-based posture like up dog, for instance. So if I'm trying to relax the body and settle the nervous system, I need to do more forward-bending flexion-based stuff than I do extension-based stuff. Yep. The problem then is that actually most of us need more extension-based stuff, not flexion-based stuff. So, but in terms of the breathing stuff, I tend to get breathing while I'm stretching, because I'll actually breathe in a way that allows my body to relax. Static stretching in and of itself is an excellent way to settle the nervous system, so you can actually kind of detune the nervous system, send it back towards the parasympathetic side just by doing static stretching. And then when you add the focus on breathing at the same time, you kind of get a double whammy. So I guess there's always a breathing component. Is it something I necessarily focus on? No, but it's certainly there. Maybe if I hadn't already been aware of it, I might think of it as a focus on it. But to me, it's just, I don't know, it's like a shadow. It's just always there.
Yeah. That's cool. So now we're drawing to the end of the interview. I'd just like to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions. You can take as long as you want to answer them. But what is your all-time favorite training book and or any other book that you want to mention that's shaped you personally and professionally?
Jonathan Livingston Seagull, probably for favorite book. It's all about kind of improving yourself and friendships, and I don't know, for some reason it had a lot of effect on me as a kid. On one level, it's about a bird. On another level, it's about religion. On another level, it's about self-improvement. There's there's a lot of good stuff in it. In terms of training, tough to say one book over another. Something like, things that really shaped things professionally, like Enter the Kettlebell by Pavel was, it's not even necessarily a great book. Well, but there's nothing great in terms of the information, but because the kettlebell became and is still such a big part of how I train other people, I have to mention, I guess, although I think Beyond Bodybuilding is a much better book of his, to be honest. I think Beyond Bodybuilding is the best book he's written, but Into the Kettlebell certainly probably had the biggest effect.
On you, yeah. And I guess it was the time that you read it probably just had that impact on you that pushed you in that direction.
Yeah, well, so I was trying to avoid shoulder surgery when I read it. And, I'd done so much damage, I needed to have surgery in the end of it. Kettlebells aren't going to heal a damaged tendon or anything like that. But what I had discovered was that these kettlebell things were pretty good, and they deserved more attention paid to them and more investigation as to how good they were. And for 5 years, I didn't train anyone with anything more than kettlebells and a pull-up bar. Yeah. So, and this is one of, like, when I see people go, you can't do this or you can't do that with kettlebells, I'm like, well, I can tell you exactly what you can and can't do with kettlebells. And so in 2012, I had 7 people that I rehabbed for 5 sports that all ended up at the Olympics. And all I had were kettlebells and a pull-up bar and an FMS kit. Yeah. Well, I can tell you exactly what's possible with kettlebells.
Yeah, I think I remember being in your facility, and your facility was just a bare bones. There was just kettlebells. There was a pull-up bar. There was, I think, maybe 1 or 2 barbells, and but it doesn't mean there wasn't results that came from your gym. Obviously, there was huge results.
I think that's, like a lot of trainers feel like they need a lot of clutter to get a result. If you really understand your tool, we as a species have created amazing athletes for thousands of years with very little. And up until recently, all that most gyms had was barbells and dumbbells. We still seem to be able to create pretty good athletes just based on that. Jesse Owens was incredible. I guarantee he didn't have Nautilus machines and BCAAs and kettlebells and all these other things. He probably had nothing other than some medicine balls and a couple of really basic barbell kind of things, and then running fast.
It's true.
If you understand the tools and how to use them, you don't actually need a lot of tools. Like a lot of people say you need a big toolbox. You need a big toolbox in terms of answers to problems. In terms of actual tools, you don't need many if your tools are able to be used for more than one thing. So for instance, I can't stand pull-up rigs. I think they're an enormous waste of space in a gym because you can really only do a couple of things with them. I'm not going to tie up all that space in my gym for something I can only do one or two things with. Whereas like a kettlebell, for instance, I can do about 1 billion things with a kettlebell.
Yeah.
That's a great way for me to use up my space in a gym.
Yeah.
But if I grab something like a leg press machine, I can only do one thing with that, and only one person can use it at a time.
Yeah.
So it's a horrible way to spend time and space in a PT gym. A big gym can afford to, but a small PT studio can't.
Yeah, it's an awesome answer. Do you have a favorite movie? We spoke about movies earlier, but yeah, any pivotal ones?
Probably not. I mean, these days, movies are not really. I don't think there's really many great sort of memorable movies. I like the old kind of Steve McQueen movies. I like Great Escape.
Yeah.
I like Dirty Dozen.
Okay.
I love Magnificent Seven. So that's the kind of era I grew up in.
Yeah.
I will always watch if Great Escape or Magnificent Seven is on TV. I will always watch it. Yeah. And then I guess like the Arnie classic Predator, which was on TV not long ago. So we'll always watch those if they're on.
Yeah, Predator's probably my all-time favorite Arnie movie. But next one is: do you have any quotes or sayings that you'd say on a daily basis to either yourself or to clients?
I have. So there's probably two. So one is, did you necessarily wake up this morning and feel like, I think what would be a really good idea would be to come to the gym and disappoint Andrew, because, what you've done here is just disappointing. You're capable of a lot more. And along the same vein is your weakness disappoints me. Obviously, you have to be very careful about who you say them to. The one I'm probably best known for, though, is and even Spartan Race quoted me on their Facebook page, was that if you want to be tired and sore, if you want to be sweaty and sore, go stand in a sauna and I'll come and hit you with a stick.
I think I've heard you say that one before.
Yeah, and this is what I was saying before. I'm not being paid to make you sore. That may happen, but I'm being paid to make you better. And so, sometimes, quite often, those two things are not the same. You may be sore, but that's not actually what you're paying me for. You're paying me to make you better. So if the only indication of the efficiency of training that you're getting is how sore you are, it's not what we're aiming for. No,
definitely not. And so if you could be known for one thing, what would it be?
I tell you that the thing you said before about the no BS and being common sense and stuff like that. I'm not a very sensible person with myself. So I'm a bit of a crash test dummy. So when I want to know if something works, I'm patient zero. I will go and test it on myself. And I've tested everything I can find on myself. I went and did Seal Fits Kokora. I've done Ironman, like all these different things. I tested on myself because no one else would volunteer to let me test it on them.
Yeah.
So it's a sad day, I think, when I'm the sober voice of reason. Because if I'm coming along saying, hey, what you're wanting to do is not sensible, you need to put that in context. I'm the person who, people say the difference between a good friend and a bad friend is a good friend will, bail you out of jail. A great friend is the one sitting next to you in jail saying, that was awesome, let's do it again, right? I'm the one who's going to egg you on to go faster, harder, jump off the cliff, whatever it happens to be. I'm right there with you. So if I'm the one saying, hey, man, this is a step too far, you need to remember that under most circumstances, I'm already pushing as hard as I think is the smartest amount to push. So if I'm saying you're going too far, you've really gone too far.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great answer. Now, the last final question is if we could jump in a time machine and give yourself advice when you first started working as a PT in the health industry, what would your advice to yourself be?
Pay more attention to sales. It would be to remember, we get confused as personal trainers. We think it's all about the technical anatomy, physiology side of stuff. And obviously that is a big part of it. But beyond that, you are a business owner, and you need to always remember you're a business owner. And that means there's a lot more involved in it than just the technical details of sets and reps and muscles. There is sales and marketing, there's communication, there's relationship building, there's all these different things that need to be addressed. And if you're not strong in those areas, your business won't be successful. And I probably, luckily, managed to survive even without really understanding that. But as I've gotten better at that stuff, obviously my business has gotten better. So, the let's call it the non-technical side of stuff. If I was talking to young Andrew and he'd actually listen, there's a fair chance he wouldn't. But if he actually listened, I'd say that this is the stuff you need to pay attention to. This stuff here is actually the stuff that's going to make the most difference. And for me, I'm only happy if the customer gets what they paid for. Yeah. So the only way I can actually make more people happy and be successful at a higher level is to actually get in front of more people. And the only way to do that is to be better at the sales and marketing side of stuff. I mean, it's just it's so important on so many levels, and so many trainers don't understand it. But then they go like to this false side of sales and marketing where they're bullshitting, they're selling stuff with no integrity, they're flat out lying, there's dishonesty, there's plagiarism, there's all these other things. Like, cut that out as well. I mean, you can still sell from a place of integrity. That's okay. You know, there's nothing wrong with saying I've got this great service over here and this is what I'm going to do. But for God's sake, don't say you're going to promise them, I don't know, like gold-plated dumbbells and like all this garbage stuff, which is usually what the fitness industry does. You can still sell from a place of integrity, and it's possible to keep all that. But you can only do it if you're actually good at that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an awesome answer. And finally, where can people get in contact with you and find out what you're doing? Just your social media and website, that sort of stuff?
Well, these days, and the website is in a state of flux because I'm not sure now. The website it's still there, but it's set up for the gym, so I'm not even going to give the address for that. Okay. The best way now is just Andrew Reid on Facebook, and there's like one of those public figure pages, and that's the best way.
Okay, cool. All right, well, I'll put all that in the show notes, and people can get in contact with you that way. So thank you very much. You've been gracious with your time and your advice. It's been awesome to sit down and spend some time with you. So thanks for being on the show.
No problem, man. It's been awesome having a chat.